Dark Souls was a franchise that provided something unique. Very difficult yet solvable everything, crazy boss fights, a nice co-op experience when you needed it, and much more than just a series. Souls-esque or Souls-like is practically its own gaming genre at this point. Many people have done twists on it, like Salt and Sanctuary, Darksiders 3, and what we're diving into today, adding a lot more multiplayer, run and roguelike elements, and of course, firearms. A series that got pretty popular and has gotten 2 entries so far. Here is my review of Remnant from the Ashes for the Nintendo Switch. In Remnant, the world was invaded by evil plant and tree-like monsters called the Root that nearly wiped out half of humanity and created a post-apocalyptic scenario. You, the player character, are from a village that got completely taken over and dominated by the Root. You go on a journey trying to reach a remote island with a big tower on it, hoping to find a solution there. Running into not only human villages and outposts, but worlds and dimensions along the way. While we're not told that much, I find this world fascinating. The Root are a well-designed group of villains, the story is kind of huge in scale but also small at the same time, and viewing more of the plot is really a big thing that pushed me to continue playing when this game frustrated me with its difficulty. When it comes to gameplay, this is classified as an action RPG. I'd personally call it a third-person shooting RPG with upgrade and exploration elements. You run around and shoot down enemies with firearms, take on huge bosses, and explore many parts of a broken Earth. As for this version, Remnant on the Switch includes all DLC from the get-go, including the extra campaign that's available pretty much once you pass the tutorial, and the special survival mode. We also have both online and offline modes for playing the game, and the Switch version has its own local multiplayer for those wanting to tackle the Root together. Speaking of modes, let's go into the most unique part of this game. Remnant is meant to be played and replayed. The campaign is played in what is called a role. This is essentially what the game decides you will experience. Many events and areas are locked to any playthrough, but a lot of the environments and dungeons will be laid out differently. You can get different bosses on different runs. Bosses can have different buffs like regenerating health or just more health in general. And even a lot of the loot you can find can be different. At any point, you can re-roll the campaign, which is essentially New Game Plus that you can access at any time. All weapons, upgrades, and items will carry over to the new roles, so if you go through the game and your first boss is the infamous Gore Fist with regeneration, you can just re-roll and see what you get the next time. This is also true for the other 2 game modes. You've got campaign, but also adventure, where you can create a smaller experience to go through, or survival, a sort of endless mode of challenges. These can also be done at the same time as campaign without deleting or ruining how far you are in the main story. Now let's get into the game itself. You create a character and have a base of operations you can move out from, featuring NPCs and shops for buying materials, upgrading weapons, and creating buffs or mods for those weapons. And then you have the world. There's a ton to explore, but it's not all super connected Castlevania-like like the original Dark Souls was. You can move from one area to the next, and some of it is connected with shortcuts, but the emphasis is more on explore, go through dungeons, explore the next area, find the next dungeon, repeat. This is extended further in the checkpoint system, where you're constantly finding new fast travel points. While you can go back to earlier areas, it's mostly a matter of each trek through the world being, okay, let's get to the next fast travel point and then go back to upgrade. And exploring these areas is where the Souls formula comes in and smacks you upside the head. This is basically Dark Souls with guns. You have a loadout of a long gun, pistol, and melee weapon, and you fight enemies with them. All the enemies hit hard and require good dodging to be able to get around and fight without being stunned and punished when you fall down. You've also got little items you can use as hotkeys for getting rid of status ailments, and limited uses of the Dragon Heart healing item that uses a long animation to recover your health. And it goes a bit further into the checkpoint system. You find these in the form of stones that will heal and replenish all of your ammo at the cost of reviving all non-boss enemies in the world. Now let's go into combat, because this is really nice for this type of game. The aiming and gunplay is great. Remnant doesn't have gyro aiming for motion controls, but it's got crazy strong aim assist, especially when you're right out of a dodge roll. When I was using a pistol or even the normal rifle, when I was aiming at an enemy with the aim assist, it was kind of hard to get the reticle away from them because the feature kept pulling it back in. And you got a bunch of stuff to enhance this, like traits for you to level up passive buffs as you quote unquote level up in the game, as well as weapon mods giving you a lot of really interesting abilities like burning shots, being able to create healing fields, tracking enemies through walls, and the list goes on. The game's really all about crazy builds that you can make, really showing the RPG side. You pick a class at the beginning, can swap around armor for different buffs, and can build yourself around different things. You can be a summoner to distract enemies with minions, focus on long range and dodging with the sniper rifle, doing a shotgun build. There are a lot of different ways to build your character up in this game and fight differently. But now let's go into difficulty and bosses. Remnant is really a game you're meant to play with others. While playing it solo will have fewer enemies around and bosses with lower health, this is a game of getting overwhelmed by robust enemies that can easily stun and punish you. Having guns in range does not protect you from all these enemies, especially once you start hitting elites that can block your shots with their blades. And then we get into the bosses. Remnant has a lot of really great and cool looking bosses. Even Gorefist, as frustrated as I was with him being the first boss that I fought, he has a great design. And then you got other stuff like the church venue for the Root Mother boss fight, or the massive building-sized tree ant that you fight in this gigantic outdoor arena. But the added element that this game adds to bosses is something that Souls fans will either love or hate. The difficulty isn't as brutal as a Souls game, but unlike other games of the genre, boss fights aren't about having a one-on-one duel with the boss. It's about carefully fighting them and their army of normal enemies that they can spawn from time to time. And that's really where the difficulty comes in. Pretty much all the bosses in this game, super easy to learn their patterns and dodge around. It's all of the enemies that they summon that you have to fight at the same time that make it difficult. Using Gorefist as an example, he's a really predictable boss. Once you fight him a couple times, you can pretty much always know when to dodge. It's the fact that he's got all of these suiciders that blow up and knock you down that makes the boss fight hard. And whether you like this or not is really up to you. To some people, this could be seen as tearing apart one of the joys of the genre, having a tough one-on-one duel with a boss. Doesn't feel quite the same when one side of that duel is sending dozens of exploding enemies after you instead of just fighting you themselves. But regardless of your opinion on that, this is a great and fun game. Running around and shooting enemies with guns is a blast, and many of the bosses are designed very interestingly. And that brings us to content and length. Your first run through the main story should take you about 20 hours, give or take. I've played a few Soul games before, and I went solo for pretty much the entire game and got it done in a little over 20 hours. And that's not even getting to any of the other modes, re-rolling, or DLC. There's plenty to do here. Next up is presentation, and this is fantastic. Visually, there is a small downgrade from other platforms. Close up, some models have to take a second or two to load in the full textures, but overall, this game looks great, especially in portable mode. No heavy blurring like in panic button games, and everything is still very detailed. Even when you swap to handheld mode, there's virtually no change in the visual presentation. And then we get to performance, which is also great. I will say that the load times can be lengthy when first going into a new area, but once you're in, you get an almost endless 30 FPS with very seldom drops. And handheld mode plays just as well as docked mode. They did a really good job here. And now let's go into battery life. Remnant from the Ashes gives the original model 2 to 3 hours, the Lite gets 2 to 3.5, the V2 gets 4.5 to 5.5, and the OLED gets 5 to 6. In conclusion, Remnant is a great take on the Souls formula, offering the familiar respawning enemies and big bosses with third-person shooting and a lot of customizable system and multiplayer options. Now on the downside, the load times can be a bit long, but if you like this type of game and are okay fighting bosses with minions, this is an incredible port whether you want to go solo or with a group. Reviews to Go rates Remnant from the Ashes for the Nintendo Switch a 9 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.